Some new faces here. Welcome. This is Hope Dealers. We do this on Wednesday nights, but also we're making a special effort to talk about anger resolution. Now, there is a difference between anger management and anger resolution. Anybody take anger management classes? You got to manage that, right? And so that means there's times that you're white knuckling the thing, managing it. But that doesn't mean you found resolve. So it's cool when you can manage it. There's a time and a place for that, but there should be a resolve to your anger so that you can do what the Bible says, be angry, but sin not in your anger. It doesn't say, anger is just a sin. God got angry. And out of anger, this is the rule we got to remember, anger means I want something to stop. You feel it, that's because you want something to stop in that moment. And many times we think that thing that we want to stop is right in front of us. Like, don't be talking to me like that, Katie. Let's go, But that's really not what's bothering. What's bothering is something that happened already that day, or maybe she looked at me a certain way and it reminded me of something. If I really peeled that stinky onion and got to the core of it, I'd find out I'm actually really mad about something else. And we're waiting for that moment to unleash that anger, because here's the other rule. Anger has a voice. Anger's voice must be heard. It's not going to be denied. You can't say, I'm just not going to feel that. I felt it, but now I'm not feeling it. No, it's either going to act out on somebody or it's going to implode on you. And most of the times we try the out on people, and they either get arrested, kicked out of school, whatever, off the bus. These are just some things that maybe I might have in my background, maybe. There's some things, right? So, and I would categorize that I was a child of rage at one point. And rage is beyond anger. You go 1 to 10, anger, anything past that is rage. And rage is where you slow down in your thinking. You get very methodical, but you're doing wild and crazy stuff. And your subconscious, your heart also will tell you, what are you doing? As you're beating somebody or knocking out a window or just like going bonkers. You have that slow, quiet voice that's like, dude, you're losing it. That's talking to you, but it feels so good to just get it out because now it's out of control. So rage is beyond 10, right? What we have not been taught when it comes to resolving anger is how to never get to 10 to begin with, or how to get to 10 and ramp it back down. The steps it takes to bring it down to at least a 5. So most classes that I teach in the jails and things like that, and when I ask people, if 1 to 10 is anger and you had to protect yourself, what's your most powerful spot? Most people will say a 10. That's because I become the biggest out of 10. I'm bigger in that moment than I realize that I am because I'm so ticked off. But really your most powerful spot is to be at a 1. People who do martial arts, people who have self-control, and they feel really violated, all this is going on, but they can keep their self at a 1. They're actually the clearest headed when it comes to thinking. You're not going to fight your way out of something if you're at a 10 and make good choices on the way. So part of martial arts, a lot of times people will look at that as like, I'm going to go to this class so I learn how to beat people up. Actually, most martial arts, I know the one that my son teaches, is about you controlling yourself so you never have to do that. Having clear thinking in the situation. And then you learn, if, against all odds, if I have to do something, this is what I would do. But the majority of the class is about you being at peace, you being at rest, you learning how to breathe through a situation so anxiety and things like that don't take over, and you have clear thoughts. Wouldn't that be sweet if we had that all the time? So I'm going to have, Sarah, if you want to hand these out so everybody gets one. And we're going to do a self-analysis when it comes to anger. Well, I tell you a little bit about myself when it comes to anger. The reason I said that I would have been a child of rage is I went through molestation and rape and some beatings and watching my mother have abuse and not being able to do a thing about it. And when you're not able to have some form of answer, you feel like you have no control. And when you have no control, you're going to enter rage quicker. trying to gain that control. And so my first day of school, I went to school when I was 4. I was almost 5, but you could send a kid earlier. We don't know why my mom wanted me out of the house a little earlier, but she did. So I probably was bored because I have one of those brains that has to be stimulated all the time. And so, so I got sent to school at 4, and my dad had taught us, even at a young age, how to box and do different things like that. And sometimes that's how we resolve things. He'd say, "You kids are fighting, go outside." And then he'd throw boxing gloves at us sometimes not. So it didn't matter what age you were. It didn't matter if you're a boy or girl or whatever. Whoever's in an argument is going to duke it out. Right? So it makes you think, his ideas, like that'll make you think about arguing. But really what that did is it just built more rage. It built more ways. If you were the one that got KO'd or you're laying there and, you know, a bloody nose or something, then that makes you think about how can I get that person back? And your brain starts to get wired around getting people back or winning or staying on top of this thing so you don't get hurt. So, you know, my dad had also trained us to, you know, if you're at school, if you're going to go to school now, right? There's some rough kids at school in 19. And so what ends up happening is, you know, I get to school, and he said, if somebody attacks you, you never walk away from a fight. Well, there's some truth in that because they can kick you in the face, you could be missing teeth, they could kick you in the stomach or something like that. You better fight your way out of that the best that you can do. Opposite of what's being taught now. You're supposed to curl up in a ball and call for help. You could be missing your teeth by that time, but I'm just saying, right? So he said that. He said, otherwise, if you have to stay engaged, you know, you're a little kid. I'm 4 years old, right? Almost 5. You punch the person as hard as you can right in the nose. And so that way, if they're punched in the nose, their eyes are going to water, or it's a reflex thing where you go, and you go down, and so you have time to escape or finish. So I get to school, first day of school. Looked to me like a little boy was picking on a little girl. That's how I saw it. I mean, probably wasn't happening. But she said, "Stop, don't," or something like that. And I did exactly what he said. You don't give them any clue. You don't give a warning. You don't give nothing. I just walked up and pow, right in the nose. You know, so I'm thinking now, little girl's going to be like, "Thank you so much. We are now best friends on our first day of school." She starts crying. Teacher comes over, and Mary, come with me, you know, and I'm like, how is this going down all backwards? I actually was taught this other thing, right? So the next memory, there's like a big blank in there that I don't remember. Who knows what went down? And then what I do remember is my mother showing up. She came to the door, and I'm at a table, like there was a table here, and I was hiding under the table. And the teacher's like, "Mary, you have to come out. You have to come out. Your mother's here." I'm like, no, I ain't doing this. So it's one of those things that anger gone awry can be trained. See, kids watch what their surroundings are, and we all watch what our surroundings are. And conflict resolution, we learned how to solve something or not solve it really well by watching the people around us. You're not born with the skill of knowing how to solve conflict or how to confront. In fact, most of the time when I ask people, how many of you it doesn't bother you to have to confront somebody? Yeah. So see, the majority, though, it's like, no, I don't want to do that. I ain't doing that. Right? Because we're looking at, if I confront something, then I'm in front of it, and then there's going to be a fight. Because we haven't learned the verbal judo it takes to walk through something without a fight. I didn't have that verbal judo. And there is such a thing as verbal judo. I'm not just using slang because I tend to do that. So, but there is something to it where we learn how you're not copping out, you're not cowering in the corner just saying whatever they want to hear or whatever, but you have a good way of addressing it and walking through it where they know you're carefronting them instead of confronting them. I care enough about you, I'm going to say this. So I'm going to say it in a way that shows that I care about you. But for me, here's my boundary, and so this can't continue. So it's a carefronting. That is not how most fights go down, where carefronting started it. No, confronting, like, dude, what's your problem? Which is really not confronting either. It's just talking smack. So we'll talk about that in the weeks to come. So here you can have a trained behavior as to how you're going to respond when you feel like someone's controlling you or you feel threatened. It's an automatic response. How many of you, if you came in tonight and the lights were dim and I just jumped out and went, "Wah!" like that, would punch me? How many punchers are in here? I'm a puncher, so don't ever scare me. It's automatic reflex. In fact, it's so automatic that it comes out and I'm like, wow, what's going on? I mean, I don't have time to think about retracting it. It just, boom, it just goes. And I don't know. It's always been there like that. So I warned my husband. I warn him. So he usually, if he's going to scare me or something, he does it from farther back. Or not when I'm just waking up or something like that. So, but that's a trained response. And some of you, as you raised your hands, you have that same trained response. We have to talk about, before we get into how to handle anger and what to do with it, we have to be able to do self-analysis of what we learned. So if you look at that sheet, it'll say, dad, mom, or whatever. And to do this self-analysis, what you're writing down now, I'll give you a minute or two while I ramble, to write down what you saw. Was your dad fast to anger? Was he a calm soul that always stayed even keel? Was he just that not there and you didn't have it role model for you? What was your mom like? Moms can be a trip, just saying. I'm a chick, I know chicks. I mean, we can just be, woo, over the top, and then, because we're made emotional beings, and if that gets out of control, look out. So, just write down a couple attributes, if you want to say it that way, of the people in your life. Maybe there's other people that are not on that list. What did you see anger handled like at church? Most churches, if people went to them when they're kids, it was like that was an absolute sin. And if you're truly in love, you should never get angry. Yeah. Over and over, the Bible says, and God became angry. And what it meant is he didn't draw the picture of anger like we've seen the picture of anger. But he was angry. He wanted something to stop. So he laid it out how it was going to stop. He laid out options for people to stop, right? So what else is on there? School. What was your experience at school? How did teachers handle anger? A lot of kids get really angry because this is the new phrase, go work it out. You know what would have been my answer in about third grade if they'd have told me that? I'd be like, absolutely, that's what we're going to do. Whether I lose or I win, we're going to go work this out, right? But it wouldn't have, because I didn't have, you can only operate off of the information you have. So you're asking two kids who are fighting, who don't know how to have the knowledge of how to prevent that. Now they're suddenly going to have the knowledge of like, yes, we are now going to go work this out. All by themselves with what knowledge? So what ends up happening is whoever is the most dominant in conversation or threats or whatever is going to be the person who's going to dominate the other person. And that person's not going to get any say-so. But they worked it out. It's worked out into a dysfunctional thing, though, isn't it? Yeah. What else we got? Relatives. What did you see with relatives? You ever have the police called, on your uncle? And he just wouldn't shut up even when the police got there, and it just went on. And you're a little kid watching this, and it's like, wow, this is all going down. Who's right? And I highly doubt, if you've seen those kinds of things, that someone sat you down after and went, let's walk through this and figure out what was right or wrong. No, you're just supposed to interpret it. Or the belief system is kids don't get that. They're resilient. They'll bounce back from it. Look, he's out on the playground playing. No, he's out there trying to figure out why he feels the way he feels. Because it was horrifying what he just saw. It just looks like he's playing. So we look at this because the word tempered is on it. The word tempered is like when you go to Walmart and you want to get a paint color for painting your bedroom. You'll hand them some type of tan, and then they'll mix it. You ever see? Like there'll be reds and all this, and you're like, so that's going to come out to the color I picked? Okay, I don't know. But it does. It comes out to the color that you picked. That's called being tempered. So all these people around us as we were growing up, or the lack of people around us that should have been there, will temper us a certain way. And that's why people will say, man, that guy's got a bad temper. We don't call it something different. It's like that's a mix of paint, let me tell you. Right? You could say it that way. I mean the same thing. That is, woo, that's a hot color. Ooh, because that's how the person was tempered. Now, was I an evil little kid when I had these issues? No. I did not feel heard. I'll say that again. I did not feel heard, nor did I feel understood. And I had secrets I couldn't tell anybody about. That's a number one thing, man, that will just wreck a heart of a child, is when you got secrets, whether it be through molestation or things where you saw what you saw, and now you can't tell a soul. Which means your brain can never process it, which means you have to keep it stored and it keeps coming to the front and then you keep shoving it back down. It's a problem, isn't it? So when we look at that, these are the things that temper us. And then when you're trying to control it on your best day, it's like, it's cool. I'm cool. No problem. But on your worst day, your color shows up. How you were tempered shows up. And you're almost shocked yourself when it shows up hardcore. Have you ever had that happen where you're like, this is, wow, I don't even know, I didn't know I was capable of that. Now, we grew up in a family, you're on a farm, so things get a little rougher anyway. No offense to farmers, but we just were rougher. You're out and you're messing with equipment at young ages and stuff like that. I remember my one brother just got mad at the other brother, and we're in a family room, and there was paneling, lovely paneling on the wall. And he just said, "You're not doing this to me anymore." And he took a hammer, claw hammer, and just threw it at my brother, just whoof, right into the wall. So that kind of stuff happened a lot where we're like, well, he just got mad. So how we saw it was, well, Dad's just mad, or so-and-so's just mad. It's just mad. So what happens is it has to go to such a high level before we'll say, something about this is wrong. I mean, this is beyond, we shouldn't be doing this, before we'll call for a boundary. If it's a normal thing, like, hammers flying, wrenches, remember that one, big wrenches you work on tractors with, those are big. My dad chucked it one time, he was mad, cussing, and went whoo, 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 right by my brother's head. But, he was just mad. Somebody got to be shot first or something. I mean, it takes it to that level, where somebody who's never experienced that would have a hard time getting over that one thing. When you're raised with it, how many of you can concur, when you're raised with it, you really have to have some shocker thing to be like, okay, I guess we're doing something now, right? A lot of heads are nodding, because it's a training that just says, where's the line? Where's the line? Well, I guess we can just put up with stuff. It's interesting. It's like your mind knows, nah, that's actually pretty bad. But since everyone's putting up with, we'll go ahead and enable that, which the word enabled means to help make it able to continue by not saying anything. You don't tell a teacher, you don't tell anybody, because it's pretty normal. I mean, he's just ticked off, or they're just mad. It's not that they're just mad. It's at a level that's out of control, and our measurement is off. And when you watch that and you take on that, then your measurement is off too. So to self-assess, we have to be able to look at ourselves and say, how often is my temperament out of control? How often do I suffer with it coming up like a boiling pot, where it's like, oh, there it is again, shove the pot, the kettle, close the kettle up, it's boiling. How often we do it. It takes up time, space, and energy in your brain, doesn't it, to have to wrangle anger all the time. It's exhausting. So the first page that we're doing is highly important. You might think, oh, I don't know, it didn't seem so bad. Well, he was just angry. So maybe your measurement is a good measurement, maybe your measurement is not. Here's how we end up knowing. We find ourselves being embarrassed if we had a friend over when we were kids. You wouldn't want to tell a counselor it because suddenly now it feels wrong. But when you're not in the counselor's office, he was just mad. It's no big deal. That should be an indicator that somehow when it gets closer to being revealed, it feels so violating and so wrong. But if you have to live with it, you have to find a way to cope, to be in it, don't you? And so we lower our standards and our measurements, and we lower our view of ourselves when we do that. What we're lowering is what we feel about our own value. So there's a difference if I stub my toe and I get mad, or I stub my toe and I get mad and start cussing at myself for stubbing my toe. Either way, I'm just mad, but it's what I do with comes out my mouth then is the second one. I'm actually destroying myself just because I stubbed my toe. You can destroy people, you can destroy yourself with what's coming out your mouth. But we have to understand, where did we get what we got? Because now you add a drug to it. Now what? If I was drinking when I was probably 16 years old, and I was drinking, I'm just like in innocent areas. I'm not even doing much, but the alcohol would lower the frontal lobe's ability to make sense. And suddenly I didn't have any mindful thinking. But guess what? It also lowers your ability to suppress what you're ticked off about. It also lowers your ability to acknowledge or be able to wrangle the trauma that you've suffered. So now it's just out there. Anything can happen. And that's with alcohol, let alone other things. So many times we'll get ourselves in trouble because we have a drug or alcohol, which is a drug, in our system. And sometimes we get in trouble by eating too much sugar. Give a kid a bunch of sugar on an empty stomach. Somebody's getting disciplined within the hour. When you say that, give an adult too much sugar, add a couple Monster drinks to it, you're ready to rock this thing. So to be self-aware, we have to figure out, what are we intaking and what have we been trained in? So to acknowledge that is the first part of resolving the anger. And I'll give you an example of that. So why would I punch the little boy in the nose? Because I felt like I had to save the little girl. Where would I have gotten that from? All the times I could do nothing about saving myself or the little girl. So really, did it have to do with that moment? No. It had to do with the feeling I was carrying around, the sensation I was carrying around when it came to feeling violated. So you see someone else be violated, then it's like, or your interpreter, your filter to interpret that can be all screwed up too. Like, was she really being violated? Probably not. It just gets messed up. So in learning to deal with anger, we have to understand that anger says, I want something to stop. What is it that you want to stop? We also know this, and you can write this down, anger is a secondary emotion. It's a secondary emotion, not every time. Every single time it's a secondary emotion. That means you felt something first, and now you're ticked. But, that's closer to the 10, right? So you might feel something first, and now you're frustrated around the 3, from a 1 to a 10. You felt something first. You felt hurt, shamed, left out. This looks like abandonment to me. I just know he's going to abandon me or she's going to. I just know you're looking down at me. Whatever that emotion that goes with that, you feel that, and you are going to try to grab a hold of control of it. To the level of your insecurity is the level you'll feel like you need to take control. I don't care if you're the Rock. I don't care if you're small, little, big. I don't care what your training is. To the level of your insecurity, you will feel like you need to take control according to how insecure you feel. How many of you would say that's true? Yeah. Begin with, I didn't buy that one. I was like, I don't know. I had to think about that. I don't know, I feel that insecure, But, by feeling insecurity means I'm not anchored. I don't have an anchor base that feels safe. so I'm not secure. And inward, I'm not secure, so I'm insecure. I don't have a base that says, here's your anchor, here's where safety is. And when I was young and I didn't know where safety is, you would just take charge. Even though you're scared out of your mind, you just do something. Yeah? So looking at this, we have to know that the Bible talks about anger, and it says not to be angry, or I should say be angry, but if you get ticked off, don't sin in your anger, though. And that's the part where we need the training. When does it constitute where you'd say, now that's sin? Anybody have ideas? When does it cross over, like, Jerome looked at me this certain way and made me feel a certain way, and now I'm like pissed. We use different terms like that, right? We're not slightly angry. I'm not saying I'm frustrated. I'm pissed, which means a higher level. And the vibration of that is inside of me. He looked at me a certain way or whatever. Now what? You what? You can already feel that you're out of control and you haven't done anything. But what are those things where's the stopping point, the measurement where we rein that back? Are we aware of that? Yeah. There's some skill. Yeah. How many throwers do we have in dishes, things like that? I have never been big into that because it always goes dollar signs. If I was going to throw a dish, I'm like, no, I got to go buy one. So I don't, that's not something. I'd slam a door, though. When my husband and I first got married, that was my power thing. Like, boom, fine then. Then he was supposed to come running and just love me more. Yeah. So, but somehow it didn't work that way. But we have these things where we have to know when the stopping point is. But if you don't know where I would say normality is, where you're restrained enough, you're not going to hurt yourself or others, or it's hurting ourselves or others can be what you say. That's one of the first indicators is when you're like, well, everybody thinks I'm a stupid, blah, 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 you know what, but I can't stand them either. And we start talking trash. That's a level where it's like, you got to rein this back in. You're past the point. Soon you won't return, right? Because now you're hurting yourself and others. So we have to understand where that is. So we're going to take it back to the basics. My husband and I took class many years ago and in Colorado. And one of the things they asked us to do is to tell each other what we look like when we're angry. So I had to say to Vern, this is what you look like when you're angry. And he had to say that to me. We were both like, no problem. Okay. And so... because I wasn't thinking I was going to get angry out of it. I'm just thinking, well, no, I know what he looks like when he gets mad. His eyebrows go down. He'll stand up straighter. He has a certain head will go back. I know all my kids and what they look like. I got one son. He'll put his head back. He does that when he's observing, too. But if he's trying to control what's going on inside of him, he'll take a breath and put his head back like that. I mean, you got to know what your body action is, because your body many times is out in front of what you're going to do next, right? So I said all that, and he took it. He was like, yeah, I do that, yeah. Okay, go, do me. Right? It's like, well, when I say something you don't like, you cock your hip out like this. And I'm standing like this, because you're supposed to face each other, and I go, I do not. And my hip comes out, and I'm like, oh, So that was like, okay, wait a minute. And then he looks and he said, you usually bite your cheek if you're contemplating. Like it's coming up about a 5, you're already contemplating. Right? Then this is the next one. If it goes past the 5, it's like I'm looking for my gun or something, It's like, where's my gun? But I do. I'll rub my fingers like this. So if you ever see this in a service, you guys all get out. Go now. Go. No. No, but it was something, but I found myself escalating because I didn't want to see me. He was fine seeing himself. But he also was a good kid when he was growing up and didn't get kicked out of things and things like that. I had experiences around anger, that were rough. Buses are hard on people. I'm just saying, man, it's one of those things, especially if you're going to be cool and sit toward the back when you're growing up, there's stuff that goes down back there that, just bruise anger. And bus drivers sometimes notice. Back then, they didn't pay as much attention because if somebody was smucking off to you and you punched them out or whatever, well, then that was settled. That's how old I am. It's been a long time since that counts. Now there's stuff that goes down, right? So, but there's something about being in that spot where I was not self-aware. And so when he said to me, you cock your hip and then your hand starts going like this. And then if I really don't like it, I tilt my head. Doesn't that look like a gunfighter as I think about it? It's like, suddenly I'm taking this posture that's not my normal posture, right? So I'm analyzing the situation. And then we had to go through and talk about what are the threatening remarks we make. Because to the level of your insecurity, see, I'm getting ready to take control. Feeling insecure right now. What are you trying to say? You're better than me? Is that what you're trying to say? Because you're not. I'm sure your mom, or whatever. I mean, this is kind of stuff that was, coming up inside of me. And my husband, he stood there and he was like, yeah, I do that when I get angry. Not I. And so it scared me about myself. It did. I went home. I didn't go off on him or anything, but I was like, what was that? Because I was becoming self-aware. It's all of a sudden, it's like, if you're a victim, everyone else is a bully, right? That's how your brain thinks. So I was in victim mode, and that's that thing of like, you ain't gonna bully me. So then you step up, and you become the bully. But you would never picture yourself as a bully. In fact, that is really insulting. So if he's saying, this is what you do when you get angry, and this is what you say when you get angry. And then they took it to another level. And if you get confronted, this is what you do. We are not talking about that. Because that's self-awareness, and it's rough on the soul. Because if you mess in that, what that does is it makes you be aware of yourself, and then you might have to hold yourself accountable for something. Correct? And if you already feel like the victim, nobody's holding me accountable for anything. I've been run over enough. See how that works? It gets messy and dicey when that happens. So the first thing to solving or resolving anger inside of you is you being self-aware. What is the thing you do? So somebody pop off and just, tell me, what's the first thing you do? Do you know the first thing you do when you're getting angry? Because see, mine was chew the cheek and the hip, and first the hip and the cheek. She stands up straight. What you got? That's your first thing? Whoa, girl. That is? Okay, yeah. Walk away. You're a yeller? Heart starts racing. You see somebody and all of a sudden their throat gets red, their chest is red, and their ears will turn bright red. Not everybody has that, but that's the amount of adrenaline that's shooting through them. And when that happens, they're not really breathing. So they're like holding on to the energy of it, and you're like, oh, snap. This is going down, And they think they're hiding it, but you're like, oh, this is bad. You see what I'm saying? And so what else? What other things? You swear? First thing comes out? See, swearing many times is a protective agent that's out there supposed to ward everybody off. The problem in our society now, if you swore in 1950, if you swore, people are like, whoa, that guy? Yeah, it can be. It can be. So you're like, woo, you would get away from that person because they're so unsafe. Well, now people use the F-bomb every third word many times, and so they're like, whatever, you're just cussing. I don't even recognize that. You have to go to a higher level to show them that this needs to stop. If you get your kids used to you cussing and stuff like that, and you want them to know, hey, I want something to stop, you're going to have to go way beyond that because that's just normal talk. See, so we have to be aware of that's how it goes on. But it's a deflective thing that says, you're in my zone, blankety blank, and then they're supposed to go, whoa. Some people, that draws them in. Some people are looking for a fight. If they're annoying you to begin with, they ain't done with you just because you cussed. When you say? How many of you are what Ted said, where you go quiet and everyone goes, oh, snap, he's not talking. Just leave him alone, leave him alone. And sometimes different personalities, they need that space to bring it back down. And if you poke the bear, I have a couple people in my family that they never got angry. Because just sit in situation, never got angry. But if they did, everybody knew there's no controlling this. We got to get out now. Because they were not a person to get angry. And then there's other people where you're raised where you can walk around in your family and just be angry all the time and everybody gets used to it. Shut up. You shut up. And that's how we just talk to each other. Take that same behavior into another family and they're like, get out of my house. You are a rude individual. So we have to know, where did we come from? And then you take where you come from and you lay it against the Bible. You lay it against the Word of God and see how it measures up. You don't lay it against, well, their family is worse than our family and he talks more trash than me. Two wrongs don't make a right. Plus, you never measure against the worst of the worst to try to get better. You always measure against where you could go and say, I'm clearly not there right now. So that was hard. It was a very humbling experience for me to have to now, do the thing of, is it wrong? What's going on? And so I got through the sheet okay. And the first time I filled it out, you fill it out that everything's everyone else's fault. So, well, my mom and she and blah, blah, blah. That's why I am the way I am. And you fill it out, right? Problem is, I might have characteristics that they've taught me when I was young, but, let's say you're 30 years old. You still going to blame it on your mom and dad now? Got to recognize it and make the choice. We have option for change. Even if you came from cussing, smacking, slap kicking people across the floor. And we must have just had a lot of adrenaline and testosterone in our family, whether you're a girl or boy, because wrestling was everything, and boxing and punching each other. And so it was normal. Sometimes we just would have it, we're bored. So I remember the game was you hold your arm like this, and then the other person punches you right about here as hard as they can, and then you have to not make a sound. These are the kind of weird games that your body's looking for some kind of release when that happens, right? And we'd have bruises and everything. Oh, isn't that fun? We laughed so hard. It was so fun. Most people don't play those games. Huh? Ted, did you? Oh, yeah. That was a party when you're like, let's see, punching people and let's see if you get a bruise or whatever. You add anger to that there, though, and it's definitely not funny. But once we cross lines of inappropriate touch, or if I punch you in the face and I'm so sorry and I cry about it or whatever, I am more apt to punch somebody in the face after that because I actually crossed over that line. Now it's not a forbidden, it's a sort of forbidden area. Do it again, now it's not forbidden at all. So we have to know, do y'all know where you came from and what your surroundings were? What was it like? Were you a survivor? Was it a dog-eat-dog kind of world? Somebody's going down, but it ain't going to be me. Was it you felt like everybody else was the norm and you were the oddball, and so that was offensive? I mean, what was in there? What's in there even now on your worst day that'll come out? The other thing that's a rule, and I'm just laying out some of the rules because we'll go back and visit these as we go through some handouts and stuff here in the future weeks. This is just phase 1, by the way. There's 5 phases to this, and we'll just pop them throughout the year here and there. One of the rules is that it's the level of your insecurity that you'll need to take control, right? What was the other one I was going to? Come on, Ash, you should know it. Now it's making me mad. No. And I don't know. It slipped me, so we'll come back and visit it. But we have to understand that anger has a voice, and it will be heard. And it came from somewhere, but we can't lay the blame on everybody else. And I did that for years. This is something you should say to yourself. I'm 100% responsible for my behaviors. Ooh, is that hard to say when you've been wronged? Except for these ones over here where so-and-so hurt me. I'm not really responsible for that. No, I'm 100% responsible for my behaviors. So you talk smack to me and you push me, you hit me or something, I'm 100% responsible for what I'm going to do after that. It's childish to be on the playground. You know, you're an adult and now you're talking like the playground. He pushed me first. That's childish behavior, right? It should be, he pushed me first and I made my best choice. As close to a 1 as I could, because I didn't want to hurt the person and I didn't want to get hurt and I didn't want this to begin with. I'm out. Look, I'm trying to find a better way to do this. But when it's the other way, it escalates really fast. So in this, if you know where you come from, then you have to own what you were taught. Can you do that? Next time, just by you admitting that you stand up straight, next time, just because you admitted here in class, next time you do that, you're going to catch yourself all of a sudden be like, oh, snap, I'm doing that thing that I told him I do in class. It's happening right now. What's wrong? You know? I mean, the other part is in anything that you want to settle or do or learn, like verbal judo and things like that, you have to slow everything down. How many of you are from 1 to a 10 like that? If somebody triggers you, you're gone, baby. Right? So that'll be the thing we'll be teaching on too, is how do you not go from a 1 to a 10? And part of that sounds stupid. And just giving you one of the answers to it, it just sounds too lame for how angry you are, is self-talk. And self-talk is good, except for if you don't know what to say to yourself, it doesn't count. You say something like, yeah, you should stop that. And yourself goes, bring it. I'll tell you who's going to stop something. You know? I mean, you're not saying the right thing. Part of it can be that you actually know the trigger of that first emotion. It's hitting the abandonment in me. That's all that's going on right now, so just breathe. Whew. You know what? I'm going to walk away from this because I have to do something with myself right now. I feel like my emotions are way too high. So can we revisit this again? I'll talk to you about it, but see, we weren't taught that skill. That sounds like mamby-pamby. There's other words that are not so nice that people use for that, right? They're like, oh, you know, such a wuss and other ones. And so, but the self-talk is to get us to the powerful spot. But if you've been trained and you believe the powerful spot is the 10, and even don't awaken the dragon, because if I enter rage, man, there's not going to be much left of you. See, that's power talk. That's like, I'm so big, I'm so powerful. You can get shot like that. You can have all kinds of things happen to you, but you don't believe that in the moment because you just went like a peacock. I'm bigger than you, you know? And pride comes up because you're trying to protect yourself because the level of your insecurity is the level you now feel like you have to take control. But the person who has control is not really arguing with their insecurity. They're just there. They're just there. My oldest son teaches martial arts, and he also trains the Isanti County Police, self-defense, and things like that. But he's just there. He doesn't allow this thing to go a trigger that raises it up, because then you do stupid things. And you hurt people and you hurt yourself. So part of his training is to teach everybody how to be just there. I'm just here. I see that you're acting out, whatever. I'm not taking that personal. I got goals and things in my life you're thinking in your head that I got to keep at. I can't be doing a distraction with you and your anger right now. All this is going through your head if you have those life skills. Otherwise, I'm a victim and that person's a bully. And I've dealt with bullies before. So then you got to posse up. And then I get a call, right? When I get a call, it's like, you can choose to answer this call at this time. This is the Isanti County Jail. I'm like, oh, shoot, that got out of control, right? So I don't want to get those calls, but at the same time, when we're working through how to overcome anger, it isn't like, here, I'm going to give you a skill, and you just go home, and now you're perfect. Wouldn't that be sweet? That'd be sweet if we could get rid of addiction like that too. Just like, here's the plan, man. Go do the plan. It doesn't work that way. So we know the Bible, and I'll be giving you a list of pages here in the weeks to come in Ephesians 4:14 through 27. It talks about when not handled correctly, anger destroys feelings of intimacy, optimism, passion, trust, and hope. It creates habit patterns for us and our children. When we go to sleep on anger, it opens the door to the devil. Were you aware of that? Verse 22 says he's the deceiver. Verse 27, it talks about the devil, or it uses the word diablos in the Bible. If you go to sleep on your anger, you had a first emotion, and now you're just trying to sleep and you're pissed. That's the perfect time for the demonic realm to talk to you. Yeah, he never loved you anyway. She's always been a jerk to me. My parents never cared. And all this information just comes up, and it's the worst of the worst. It's all, I've been bullied. I'm a victim. This is not right. And then you're like, tomorrow, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to call, right? And it'll set you up for trouble. Where if you say, but I can't resolve that anger tonight, and I'm about to go to sleep, so what am I supposed to do? You can resolve it enough by saying, God, I don't know who's wrong or right here, but I want to be on your righteous side. And so I'm not going to let people run me over, but I'm also not going to run them over. So show me how to do this. I choose to forgive, and I'm going to sleep. That's all wiped away. And the devil's like, oh, Diablos can't share anything that sticks. But let me tell you what, when you embrace that anger, I'm never being abandoned again, and I'm never dating again. This is, and the next time they say this, you know what I'm going to say? And then we start running scenarios. Ever do the scenario thing? Half the night, you're running scenarios. And now you're ready for war, and that war never comes. All the stuff you ran the scenarios about, you planned for the wrong thing. It's almost like Diablos is like, no, we're not doing that plan. We're just going to let you worry about it, and you get all ready for it, but we're not going to follow through. We'll do this over here that you haven't thought of. Right? So that's just how it works. And so Diablos, the definition is false accuser, slanderer, transducer. The thoughts running through our minds are about the person or the situation. When we do not handle anger correctly, those thoughts are not from God. They're coming directly from Diablos. There is a spiritual component. And if you get so angry and you can't figure out a way to run a scenario and solve that, we come up with the most grandiose scenarios, don't we? I'm leaving. I'm going to kill myself. I'm done. Nobody needs me anyway. This is like the end explosion. Because everything up until that point convinced us there's no point. There's no way out. Yet the God of the universe, who created it all, has a way out of everything. Most of the time, he'll take you through it so that you can get to the other side. There's no avoidance. There's no disassociation. There's no denial. It's like, let's go through this and learn how to handle it. Oh, hard. It's hard. So at the same time, this is Ephesians 4:14 through 27. It talks about speaking the truth in love, and that's a skill that we're going to be learning. Love by itself doesn't grow or mature us. Truth by itself is brutal. But together, they will develop and mature the person. I always say, love without truth is not love at all. And truth without love is not truth at all. So that's the best verbal judo, is to be in that zone, isn't it? Where'd you come from? What'd you see? I saw kids waiting for their parents to come for a visit when I was doing foster care. And we had 12 kids, some of them little, some of them bigger. We did this for many years. I saw a visit supposed to happen and a child walking in front of the window. Are they here yet? No. No, mommy, no, daddy, not here. It's okay. Do you want something? No. And the anxiety of them walking back and forth. See, that's the first emotion. Is that anxiety? The second emotion, when they don't come, is at least a week of hell for the foster parent. because now I can't trust even more. So now I don't trust my surroundings. I don't trust you. I'm not doing my schoolwork. I'm not going to preschool. I don't care. It's explosive. And if you saw that at school or something, guess what? They don't see the innards of that. So what they would do is they'd be like, this child has such and such. It's probably reactive attachment disorder from the blah, 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 right? Well, sometimes it is, but most times it's not. They've just been hurt, and we've all been hurt because sin does that. Sin is here to wreck families. It's here to wreck our life. It's here to wreck our way of thinking, or God's way of thinking in us. So I've seen anger be taught by disappointments, by unmet expectations, where you set a goal and it doesn't get met, and then you set a goal and it doesn't get met. Now you're talking to somebody out on the street or at Walmart or whatever, and they say something to you has nothing to do with the base of why you're hurt. And you rip their head off. Is it really about, I don't know, Kellogg's Rice Krispies going up in price? No, it's probably not about that. So when we go to try to peel the onion and find the core of what's really bugging us, sometimes it's hard because it looks like the thing right in front of us is the thing that's bugging us. But when you step back from it and just take a breath, you begin to realize, I all day have been feeling afraid of abandonment. I've been feeling run over. I just feel like I could die today. I don't think anybody would care. That's the base feeling we're walking around with. Now we're supposed to control our temper. That's in the mix of the paint can inside of us. That's in the mix. So we have to know where we came from, and we have to be able to be self-aware right now. Right now, just me even talking about it could bring up a hurt, right? And this is what they're teaching now. Don't do that. You could trigger somebody, right? Hey, I've had panic disorder. I was hospitalized for it, different things like that. I know the trip, right? But at the same time, I'm healed. And I didn't get healed by, don't trigger me, don't trigger me. Okay, you don't want to go into something where you're asking for trouble. But stuff is going to happen around you that's going to trigger the cluster in your brain. And that cluster in your brain is how your neurons were formed. And when that fires, the majority of the firing is trapped around the trauma. And now it feels like it's happening to you all over again right now. So we have to step back from that and rein that in on top of it. And we still haven't learned how to talk to the person with good verbal judo because we're feeling all of this. And so most people who suffer temper issues or anger issues are misunderstood. I've actually been with the police department, well, not the whole department, just a few cops that showed up. Just a few that showed up in Colorado to a situation that was domestic violence. And this happened more than once. And so they're like, okay, so yeah, you can talk to this person or that person once we're done questioning them, blah, blah, blah. Domestic violence, like they're just ripping into each other. And many times the officers would see two really hot-headed people. One was more the controller, and one the less, just trying to protect themselves. And they got to get their act together, and because they didn't have classes and stuff on anger resolution. And so what I would see when I would show up is two hurting people, two really great people who are hurting. The violence that I incurred when I was a kid, whether it be the person molesting me or whatever, all of those people, I'm not making excuses for the sin, but I'm saying really hurting people. Created in the image of God, but got hurt, and they can't figure their way out of it. They weren't given the tools to figure their way out of it. That's what I see. So here's how it works in training. Training is, from the time that you're the third trimester, which we'll talk about in the weeks to come, a pregnancy, you're in your mother's womb, your brain starts to record. And it records through your 5 senses. It knows whether or not your mom's yelling. It knows whether or not, the child knows whether or not it's being rejected, contrary to popular belief. that's out there. It knows all kinds of stuff. It even records the sound of blood flow, which sounds like this. Shh. That's why white noise helps for children to sleep, because it's a subconscious memory of their safe place, if they were safe, right? It's also why we shush babies. We don't go, ah, when we're trying to put them to sleep. You're like, blah, 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 blah. You know, we don't do that. We go, shh. Why? We don't even know, right? But it goes back to they're comforted, especially if they're only 1 or 2 months old, because they remember the sound of the safe place. So we record everything in that 3rd trimester, whether or not you're wanted or whatever. You're born with those feelings. You're born with that stuff going on in your little recording. Do you know what to do with that? No, it's just recorded in your subconscious. Later, when you get the cognitive ability to process it, it will come back to you and like, hey, they never wanted me. Why do I have a feeling like I'm not wanted? Or, hey, there was a lot of yelling. I'm always stressed. I don't know. It's in your subconscious. Whether you can recall it or not, it's in there. So when we look at that, there's something that happens. It's called clustering in the brain. So EMDR breaks up clusters. There's other things that we can do that break up clusters in the brain. It's where the wiring in the brain gets hot. And then all of a sudden it says, we got to attract all kinds of information regarding that one thing that hurt me. And so you start pulling in and be sensitive. You know, if you got rejected, I saw that person get rejected. That's what happened. My teacher didn't like me. And you're starting to record around it till it takes up a big area in your head. It takes up time, space, and energy in your brain. And that's really what we don't want triggered, is that cluster. The bigger the cluster, the more it thinks it rules what's going on. You heat up the underside of your brain, it will trump the top side of your brain. Have you ever had that? Where all of a sudden you're just like so worried, so upset, so whatever. Somebody could tell you, you know, hey, tell me your child's name. And you're like, I don't even know. When were you born? I think October. And it will get like that because the underside of our brain is so hot that it will trump the top part where your cognitive thinking is, and it can't think in that moment. So that's when we really know everything's got to calm down, right? But if you upset a cluster that was built around something that happened in 4th grade and you're 40 years old and it never got dealt with, it's a pretty big cluster. You've been collecting and growing neurons around this thing this whole time. That's pretty big. Now, I spoke this before, but I want to get it on the recording for those who are watching online also. This was a fun little thing that I found, as my grandchildren have pointed out. Yeah. So this is what ends up, this is a really good example of what it looks like in the brain when you have a cluster. Right? It's a hive built around a thought pattern. Hives are built around the queen. So one of the things we're developing as we're, studying on this and whatever is I like these kind of illustrations where the Lord will point that out. And so we go after the queen when we're trying to get healed. What happens is there's so many sentinels that are around the queen when they decide they're going to build a hive. Their job is to protect the queen, right? And they start building, and she's in the inside, and they're like, must protect the queen. This is where I was hurt. This is where nobody understands me. This is the thought. This is the thing I could not get over. This is where nobody gave me information, permission, right? Or safety to be able to get over this queen thought. And it starts to build in the brain. And if you look at, if you get stung by a bee, it's not the queen that comes out. We always think it is, though. We're like, there's that thought again. It's the supporters, the sentinels, the workers that will take you out if they have to, because all their job is to protect the queen. The same thing happens in your brain. So if we don't have resolve, we haven't reframed the thought, we haven't repositioned it, because you're not going to just say, I don't remember the queen. So there, now I don't remember it. It'd be sweet if we could just do that, except we forget half our world, and that would be kind of a mess. But so if we're forgetting the queen, that'd be cool, but we can't do that. So we know that queen sends a signal out to all the workers, all the synaptic nerves that have recorded things around the queen's activity. So if the queen thought pattern in you is rejection, All of the sentinels have that same vibe. We will find rejection. We will build on rejection. We will, make sure that we can protect ourselves from anybody ever trying to do that. We're not going to let another queen come in here either. We're going to make sure. And in fact, I sense someone coming, and all of a sudden, if you've ever been around a beehive, the sentinels will come out. They fly real slow. And if you look in the air, you can see them. They're heat-seeking off of your body to see if you're giving off a vibe that they need to sting you about. You can stand there and they'll fly. Most of the time, they will not sting you or bite you, because some are famous for doing both. But if they can feel your fear, because it's a different energy, right, that says, uh-oh, somebody's here to attack the queen. We just go sting them. Get rid of them. Get them as far away as we can. And then what are we doing? We're like running around with our hands in the air. And they're stinging us. Or we're taking off running, fight, flight, or freeze, because we're being stung by the sentinels of that thought pattern. Your brain works just like this. So when we go to get healed, what we'll do many times is we will just keep fighting the sentinels. Figure out a way we can escape the sentinels. Figure out a way that we can have a certain suit on, and if they come, when really we need to be after the queen. Don't we? You take out the queen, you take out the hive. The queen is built in your trauma. The queen is built around a lie anyway. Nobody traumatizes a person. Sin does not traumatize you and leaves the residue of truth. It always has the residue of a lie. You see that? My father left me and he never came back because I'm stupid. Right? Sin will happen, it develops the queen, and the queen says, this is the vibe we're standing on. I got to get me some sentinels. We're going to build this thing. It's going to be huge. We are taking over. And then she just gets ready to reproduce that thought, because she's all about the eggs of that thought. She's all about how can we build on that thought. I mean, can you imagine? This was over probably a 2-month period of time, not even, because I don't know when they started the hive. Can you imagine if this was left to develop for a year? Some of us have some queen thoughts that have been developing for 25 years. And now we condemn ourselves because when we go to deal with the thought, we get stung all over the place. We're like, I don't know, I just had that thought, and then I got all triggered, and stuff started stinging me, and I just can't even go to work. My eyes are swelled shut. Been crying half the night. I punched a mirror. I mean, whatever your reaction is the anger. And we'll say, that's your bad temper. No, that's the queen lighting you up. See it? That's the queen lighting you up. So we have to get good at, and we are going to get good at, and taking apart some of it over these first 4 weeks here in phase 1. How do you get at the queen and take her out? You got to go through the sentinels. But there is a way, right? And one of the things, like I said, she feeds on the lie that the hive is built on to begin with. Take away the lie, there's nothing for her to feed on. So we're going to kill the queen. Now somebody will take that and cut just that section out, and you can come visit me in jail. But don't do that, Ted. You're thinking about it. So it's interesting that if you look at this hive, and you can look at it afterwards because it creeps me out, and you might want to have that experience. They're still dead in there because my husband aced them at night, because that's when you go out. You take, when it least expects it, I'm going to take it out. So you go out at night when it's sitting more dormant. Sometimes that's when we need to make a move on the recovery from some of the trauma. What we do is we get all stung, the whole thing's triggered, we don't know what we're doing, we show up for counseling. Well, how much of that are you going to receive? It's kind of like, as a counselor, you're like, yeah, put this salve on it, maybe check in with your doctor, And then we're really in a spot of like, I fear that thing, that could come at any time. Rather than getting on the other side of it and being like, I'm not afraid. We got to kill the sentinels, we'll do that, but we're after the queen. I have to go out at night, I will. So that might mean you picking a different time when you're the most healthy to go deal with something. You know why we don't do with it? If I do that, there's a chance of triggering the hive. And right now, I feel really good. So we've been trained to learn to wait till we fall apart before we deal with something. How many of you know when you do that, there's an anger zone in there? To the degree of your trauma is the degree that you have the possibility of acting out, doing these different things, fight, flight, and freeze. This gets triggered, and they start coming out. I mean, you've seen people run from bees. Everything's whipping around, and they're doing a dance and whatever. You're trying to get away from them. There's other people who will stay and just try to fight, and they end up really stung. Stung did. Yeah. It's getting late. Work with me. So they end up having this problem, and in the long run, they should have picked a better time. Don't wait for it to trigger. Go deal with it when you feel the most powerful. But that's the day we'll go to the beach. That's the day we go bowling. That's the day we don't show up for Bible study because there's fun things going on. And then we wait for it. And when we least expect it, we get stung by one of the sentinels, which triggers the rest of the hive. And we're on the run, or we're fighting, or we're standing there just being stung to pieces. See, I'm just laying a foundation, how our brain works, and how what we were trained, what happened to us, and how they culminate together. So I was in a short class. It was a Bible study or something. I got saved in 1981, so that was way back. But I remember this. They were talking about anger and using scriptures on anger like as if you need to knock it off. Just knock it off. But they weren't saying it. They were saying it more religious. You can get real breathy at this class. I remember it because it was like, well, God. See, when you want to really have a religious voice, you got to drag it out and get real breathy. Trust me, I'm a believer in God. But this is what they're, God would never want you to get angry. We know that that is not his will. As a little kid, well, I wasn't a little kid. I was actually a teenager at the time. I'm thinking, man, you must drink a lot of coffee because your breath is like, whoo. You know. I mean, I didn't really get anything out of it. What I got out of it was condemnation, though. That like, yep, I knew I was jacked up because I get angry a lot, so that must mean I'm way on the other side of God, and I have no real way to get back. So that was hard. Rather than saying, you know what, we all have anger, and anger is actually there for a good reason. It's just when it's out of control is when it enters the sin realm. Because if I came and I just said, hey, Bonnie, I'm just going to slap you in the face, take your purse, and leave. And you didn't have any anger in you, there's nothing, you just be, oh, praise God. She's such a lovely lady. I mean, people could violate you, whatever. You have to have some kind of boundary that says, hey, no, that's my purse. No, we ain't doing this. Touch my face again, and I'll call the police. In fact, I might call the police already, depending on how you did that. Right? Because good boundaries are good boundaries. But there's an anger there that goes, here it is, draw a boundary. And we go, I don't have one. We'll pull the lever. I only got this big lever over here where people die. So, I mean, that's pretty much what I had. I'm like, what's your options? Well, do nothing and just let anything go, right? Or we're just going to pull the biggest lever ever. Let the chips fall where they may. Right? So I had to change that way of thinking, and many of us have that way of thinking because, not because you think bad, because we weren't shown anything different. Nobody gave my brain a different option. Once I saw different options, it's weird, but you're like, I would have never thought of that. Like, you can say that? I didn't know you could say that. I started learning boundaries and appropriate talk. It was like, oh. Like if somebody would have called when I was like 12 years old and, just said something mean to me, it would be like, boom, and it would have been like that. God's sanctification power is wonderful. You know why that would have been, though? I didn't have any other options. There was nothing in my brain to grab and say, you could do that, but you could also do these 3 different things. I didn't know. So once I had the options, when I went to do the brown, it was like, okay, all right, doesn't sound like you're ready to talk to me right now because you sound really angry. And I don't really want to get involved with that. I'm working on me right now. So call me back when you're in a better mood. I didn't have to go over here and do this. Now, if they completely lose their mind on the phone, I never have to change a bit. Sorry you feel that way. We don't even hang our phones up like this anymore. It's just pegged myself as at least 100 years old. We have to go, right? Just start swiping all kinds of. No. Trying to look for something we could put on Facebook regarding them. So that's how it works, right? So there's keys of knowing yourself, keys in knowing your cluster. So these are all things I want you to think about before you come back next week. What's your main cluster? Because you got one. We've all been touched by sin, or we participated in it, or both. So what happens is it starts a cluster. Now what is that? One of the big clusters for me was not being heard. Like I would try to have a boundary, and it was like, hello, I'm over here. Nothing. If somebody did heard me, there'd be this, acting like I'm drinking. If you did hear me, there's usually a big reaction. Like my dad didn't have any other information, but big reaction. I mean, he was a Marine. That's just how they handle it way back then. It's a little different now. But he showed up at school, and everyone's like, Mary, the principal's running across the field. I'm like, what? Your dad came to see him. I'm like, he did not. All of a sudden, I'm like, oh, snap, he did. And he literally, we could see him. We were crossing from one school to the next, and he's out there running his hands through his hair like this and everything. And I'm like, this is so embarrassing. That's my father. Right? But to him, his training was, we're going to take care of this. Wrong or right, we're going to take care of this. We'll get this done. What's the training in the background? Where did the cluster come from? So that said, I'm not going to hear you, I'm not going to hear you. But, today I have heard you. Guns blazing, we ride in on a white horse. We're going to save the day. And you're like, calm down. No. That's why when I was molested and then later on raped, sounds like the same thing, but it is different, attacked, it was not something I would want to tell my family. Because that would be guns blazing. Now it would be handled different, but back then it would be like, posse up, my brotherhood, and then now somebody dies or goes to jail, that's totally my fault. That's how kids see that. That's how young people see it. It's like, I ain't telling nobody. So it keeps things more secret. Because there's going to be this huge reaction or nothing at all. Anybody identify with that? Saw a couple here. So you know what I'm talking about. If you don't, just go, wow. That's how it went down. So we're identifying before next week your main cluster, because around that main cluster is the sentinels that keep stinging you when you can't sleep at night. And then you have that first emotion of the hurt, and the second emotion that says, I want this to stop. I'm so fed up with this, right? You can't sleep, you go to the doctor, and he's like, that's anxiety. Is it? It can produce it, but out of the gates, no. You are actually angry, and you need to be heard. There is something in a cluster that you have not processed. Nobody was there to work you through it, make you safe enough, give you new information, and so you're stuck with this cluster. And if you say it, there's going to be some big reaction or nothing at all. That's going to be hard to work through, isn't it? That's why many times kids get molested in the bathrooms at school and things like that. They ain't saying. Because the big lever then, many times, is it's either so secretive, shh, don't tell, we're not going to, whoa. Or it's going to be the whole school knows that something went down and you narked. Right? So it makes you afraid of your surroundings. We cannot grow unless we're safe. Your brain cannot expand to new thoughts unless it feels safe enough to do so. So if you did poorly in school because there was a lot of abuse and things going on, you're not dumb. You're not a stupid person. The brain was highly distracted, though, because you don't learn unless you're safe. And when you're safe, then someone has to give you permission to try other options. And if you're surrounded by people that don't have any other options, you don't have the options. But even if they were there, they say, nah, don't you leave that. We don't do that here. Well, then how are you going to get healed? It's hard stuff. Many times, probably week 3, we'll talk about this. I'm just laying it all out for you here, putting a taste in your mouth. We're probably going to talk about what happens when you have somebody who's a controller in the house and the whole house reacts to that one person. Now you're getting stung by their sentinels, and your sentinels are stinging you. And who are you going to tell? Especially if you're a kid or you're somebody, a person who feels less than that person or used to being controlled and you let them control. Now, are you going to bring something up? No, you're not doing that because you're going to get hurt more. So we lock in and we freeze into that spot and let the abuse continue to happen. How many of you have been through an intervention? Been a part of one or you got intervened on? Yeah. So those are really important done correctly. But what it really does is one thing if the family does it, but it has a strong effect if you can bring in an outsider who can see into the family to be able to say, you know what, the way you're talking to the family is actually abusive. It's received totally different because the cyclical pattern of arguing is built with the people that are closest to you. You bring somebody in from the outside, it's like, oh, outsider alert. I already know how to sting all these people. Already know how to handle their hive. And they've got to learn how to handle mine. And now you bring this outsider. We don't know if they're a bee killer or not. What are they? Right? I've been in those situations. I never go in thinking people are going to love me in the end. They usually do not. Maybe some years later, they'll be like, you know what, sorry about that, thank you, but not up front. And I don't go in guns blazing. I just go in and give a perspective. Hey, this is what I saw. And, you know, whether you know it or not, you're really enabling this behavior. I don't enable. Yeah, you do. It's hard. It's hard to see that. But sometimes you need an outsider, a counselor, somebody to just speak into that and let that cook for a little bit. Because just like when Vern said, you put your hip out, and you chew your cheek, you turn your head, and you do this with your hands. That was hard for me to hear. I'm like, no, I don't. Right? And the little kid in you starts, you know. But you don't want to do that, but yet you do to a certain degree. And I remember thinking back on that. It's like, that was kind of embarrassing that I couldn't see it and couldn't acknowledge it. And nobody wants to come out the dummy or the one less than or the one with the problem. But how bad do we want the situation healed? Then we all got to own our stuff. Everybody plays a part when anger's out of control. We're 100% responsible for our own behavior. Amen? Had to tell myself that over and over. And the only reason you lose control, here's another one, is because you wanted to or you actually lost control. Right? There's a part of us, I lost control, but there's also a part, and many times that it's like, yeah, I kind of wanted to, though. Just a couple punches in, and I feel a lot better. Even though I'm going to jail, I mean, it just was there, you know? So there's something about that, too, just knowing and understanding that. So we're going to be talking about this in the weeks to come, how to undo the cluster. Now, you can go to counseling and talk about the bee, the queen. You can even tell the person how many times you've been stung. But unless you figure out what that thing is stuck to and what it's built this hive around, you're just going to keep getting stung. And so they can medicate you for all those sting marks because it's a form of poison in you when you get stung. That's what makes it swell up. Some people swell up more than others. It feels more hurtful and everything to them. Some people almost die from that thing that happened, and somebody else can keep going with a few sting marks. But it hurts no matter what level it's at. So we have to figure out what our hive is. And you might come here, well, I'm actually here for other people because I love to minister. I don't have an anger problem. Let me see if I can make you mad. We'll see how fast you got an anger problem. I know how to do that. No, I ain't going to do that. But I'm saying that everybody suffers it, because here's the people that say, I don't have an anger problem, first have the anger problem against themselves. That one just went in a few people. Pull it back out. So the people who, what did I say? I said it so fast. Yeah, oh my gosh. People who say they don't have an anger problem first are the people who are angry the most at themselves. Yeah. I hate myself. I don't like me. So stupid. I just whatever. But anyways, I got to solve this with that other person. I don't have an anger problem. I mean, but people do hurt me. That guy's a jerk. Yeah, but you were suffering anger. You're actually angry at yourself that you continue on. That you're even in the relationship. That you were even born. I mean, it can go to levels. Because you're more angry about who you are than you are at that person who's bugging you. Because what they're doing is they're being sassy in whatever way, and they're poking the hive. Like, let's just see if we can trigger up this sucker. And then you're going to get stung. I'm out of here. Right? That's all you, man. That's all you. No, you knew what you're doing. Many times passive-aggressive people, which we'll be talking about in the future, do that very thing. They passive-aggressively just go through and light up the hives. And they're like, la-da-da, I'm going to Walmart now. And they have a way of looking innocent, and everybody's all stung to pieces, and they're mad at each other, and did you trigger me? I didn't trigger you. I mean, it's all going on. And that passive-aggressive person's like, lee-hee-hee in the background. Ooh, that's actually harder to deal with than somebody who's blatant in your face. I would rather have somebody just say, here's how it is, Pastor Mary. I can't stand you. Be like, all right, now I know where you're coming from. Anybody find comfort in that? You don't find comfort in it, though, if you're still a child of rage, because now there's a whole follow-up thing that's got to happen and whatever, you know. But you can say that kind of stuff to me, and it's not going to move me, because that's your opinion in your heart with your hive. Ain't my hive. Right? I've killed a few queens, too, so that you can't rile up what I got going on, because those cluster areas are dying off. Right? That's the power we want. We want to stay at a 1 because we've been healed. Because you're not going to change everybody around you. Have you noticed that? We just change the world. And then we're mad that we couldn't change the world. Because you're not going to. The most power you have is when you change yourself and you stay toward the 1. Level thinking, loving thinking. You don't feel like you have to control everything. If that guy wants to lose it, that's his deal. I just got to be myself to safety. I've even had people call me and they're like, fine then, I'll commit suicide. I'm like, okay. Oh, you're not supposed to do that. And I answer them back real calmly. Thank you for sharing that. I might need to call the authorities, though, because you need a wellness check done. I just want you to know somebody's going to come check on you. There's no need for the high highs or the low lows. Just even. That's a pleasant place to live. And whenever I'm outside of that line, it bothers me because I know what peace feels like now. And, my husband has said many times, because we had all kinds of different people coming in and out of our home and different things like that, and with all the foster care and stuff that we did, he would establish with a new person coming in, hey, this is what the peace of our home feels like. Okay? We're going to maintain that. That's how it goes. Because you can definitely feel if something's interrupting that peace. But if you've never felt peace before, how would you even know? Well, I felt peace. The peace that passes all understanding keeps my heart and my mind in Christ Jesus. But I'm still got some areas. I'm sure there's some areas that it's like, why did that trigger? Not a very big hive many times, but an annoyance. It's an annoyance. This thing's trying to create something up here. We're going to take the queen out right away. I'm going to do some self-talk. I'm going to see what the word says. We're going to get into this. I'll stop everything to kill a cluster. That's what you do. You get to help. You get to safety right away. Because you don't want that getting big. That's a pretty big cluster right there. That doubles in size, triples in size. God can do anything, but man, there's a work that needs to be done. Let's stand. We're going to stretch for a little bit. Hallelujah. Thank you, Lord, that you're going to instill inside of us and be that we're self-aware. We know where we're headed. In the name of Jesus, we thank you for everything you're doing here tonight with being aware. While we're standing, is there a question? I just want to make sure, because if you got a question and you leave with it bugging you, you might get angry about it later. Yes?
Are we going to go over at some point how to not go from 1 to 100 in 25
Yes.
seconds?
Yeah. Yeah. So you learned, where did you get that training from? Right? And give yourself a reality check. Those people that trained you that way, if it's training, are not bad people. That was their training too. So you give yourself permission, and I give you permission to break that training. You're literally going to break a cycle of like, no, I ain't rolling like that. We're going to do this thing totally different. Your subconscious will even say, you're going outside the mark. You're gonna go different than your family and everything. Yeah, that's where we're going. We're going somewhere where no man has gone before, right? And we're going to establish in the brain. So you give yourself permission for that too. But it is a work that's going to take some time. But once you have the keys and the levers of boundaries, the right levels of boundaries, even when a person's getting divorced, for instance, the first thing you do is, I'm hurt, divorce. Right, well, no. Back up the train and let's work this thing. Maybe we do this. Okay, that's not working out. We better get some counseling. Boundary. Not going to continue in this unless we get some counseling. Okay, they go to counseling, but it's still not changing. Blah, blah, blah. You up the levers. Unless they're heat-seeking to kill you and you got to get out right now, you just move up. That way, in the end, if you end up divorced or whatever's happened, you can clearly think in your head, I have done all. I walked this thing. I tried to keep to the agreement. I wanted the help, and that person did not. See, it's the same thing of going 1 to 100 or 1 to 10, right? Sometimes, anybody here ever black out when you got angry? Yeah. Sometimes that's drug-induced because now you're angry and your brain's on overload on meth or something like that. But other times it's literally the brain, the subconscious saying, whoa, that is way too much information. Shut her down. Now, it remembers everything, but you won't be able to recall what happened. There are people who punch people out, end up in jail, and people think they're lying. They'll be like, you're lying. You were there. I saw you. You were hitting him. Yeah, they don't remember any of it. It's a real deal. Yes?
Do you think that clusters, like, do they have to go, like, the anger come back from your childhood, or, like, does it always have to stem?
Usually, if it's a strong cluster, it does have a childhood base. Because from the time you're in the third trimester to between 26 and 30 years old is when your main foundational pathways in your brain is growing, right? So the whole thing, you're 18, now you're adult. No, you got to get between 26 and 30 years old for that foundation. Then we build on that foundation. Help me, Jesus, right? I had to go back in and say, I ain't building nothing until I wreck this and rebuild the foundation and shore it up. And then we can put up a wall. We can put up the rest of it. But sometimes we got to go and bust that up. So a cluster can start, let's say it started with you in 4th grade, right? Some things said you were stupid, but the really hurtful things then develop when you're 18, 20 years old. And all of a sudden, there's just this innate feeling inside of you like, I'm stupid. Everything I do, I'm stupid. That's the cluster. It started when you were younger, but it's well established now. And it's more believable at that point because there's so many neurons built around it. Go ahead and sit down. I'm going to share one story and we'll go. Just want to drive this home because sometimes when you learn this, it can open a can. You learn this and all of a sudden you go, yeah, that's what you said. Next thing you're bawling and you don't know why. Because what it does is it gives your brain permission. Your brain's been on hold, like, we're going to process this? I don't know if I want to process it. Suddenly you get just enough information to be dangerous, but not enough to know. So I just want to share, and I've shared this story before, so some of you have heard it, where my grandmother had passed away. She was my everything. I'm probably the one, even though my skin has gotten light because of vitiligo, that looked the most native in my family, the most like my dad. I'm the only one with brown eyes, and my grandmother was very dark. And so I identified with her. Mom's side of the family is green-eyed, German, real white. So it was like, yeah, they're my family, but I didn't identify the same. And with all the fighting and stuff going on in the house, my grandma was my world. You ever have somebody like that? It's like, grandma understands. She knows, and I like many of the things that she liked and all of that. So we had this relationship, and then I think I was around 9 years old, and she passed away. Now, my memory base says she passed away just out of nowhere suddenly, because I wasn't there when she was whittling away, cancer was whittling away at her body for months. I don't know when she got the diagnosis. All of a sudden someone said, Grandma's sick, because how you try to protect the kids, and then maybe I wasn't paying attention or whatever. Then all of a sudden it seemed like she just died. And I was crushed, like crushed. And when that took place, then I ended up, going to the wake, and people were standing around talking. Now you got a 9-year-old view of things, right? How we remember things is how we recorded it. So if you got a tragic memory at 3, you're remembering it like a 3-year-old. You got to keep that in mind. So you recall that. So I'm looking around at the people, and they're all standing around. They got coffee and the crumpets and things, and they're talking, and people start laughing, and I'm like, that's not funny. I'm getting angry because I'm not understanding. They're probably sharing good memories or jokes Grandma used to say and stuff like that. From my worldview, of my little 9-year-old brain, I'm looking up and it's like, you guys are jerks. This is not funny. That's my grandma. So I go over the casket, I touch her hand, and then I turn to everybody and go, stop! This is my grandma! And she's dead. Or something like that. And then all of a sudden it dawned on me what I did, and I was like, oh, snap. All the adults go, woof. That's how it felt at 9. It was like a slow-mo kind of thing. And I'm like, I got to get out of here. So I take off running. And I run down the street, which in my memory base was a long ways. And I was running at the speed of light. Like literally. That's how I remember it. I remember just, and as I'm going, I'm like this. And then I turn back. And I'm doing this. And I turn back and I see my father. He's way back there, which wasn't really that far back because I've gone back there. And it's just like going from here to the back of the church. But I was running, And so, in any case, I saw him. And he was there, and then I kept running, and when I looked back, suddenly his hand's on my shoulder, and I just go down. He didn't shove me down. That's how I remembered it. But later, it was like I realized, no, that was just a trauma response. Everything was up so high, I just was like, whoa, and I went down. Right? And he's embarrassed because of his program and his clusters. He's like, you just shamed me in front of the whole family. Like, what is your problem? And except it came out different. What the blank's wrong with you? And I'm laying there, and I'm just like, it's horrific. I'm like, doing that, and all of a sudden it just shuts off. No feelings at all. Just done. And I get back up. And then the next day I said, I don't want to go to the funeral. And as people were leaving, they said, do you need anything? No. I said, but I do have one question. Why did this happen to Grandma? And the answer was, bad things happen to good people. So here's the trauma, right? The running, and I'm going, all of a sudden I'm like, now maybe they said bad things happen to good people, bad things happen to bad people. But I don't remember anything but bad things happen to good people. Cluster started. Queen flew in, was like, this is a good one. This is a good one. Let's start this sucker, And it starts clustering in there. And yet, then the nervousness that came around it is like, I just helped that person. I'm a good person. I could die. My grandma was a good person, and she died. So the fear of death began to build. Then I'm at school, and I get this, here's another cluster coming. We're going to build on this hive, right? It's really big. This is how it happens, 9 years old. Then there's this young man at school, because my grades are going up and down. They don't know I'm a yo-yo. Straight A's to straight F's, because one day I cared, and the next day, not so much. And so they come in, and they're talking to my parents, what do we do this, whatever. So I get with this tutor from high school, Christian guy. I wasn't a Christian at the time. And just loving. Like, this guy rocked. And it was like there was some kind of safety coming off of him that was like, I will learn to do anything. Teach me to read, my friend. And he was there, and he did that. And all of a sudden I went back to school on a Monday, and he was gone. I started asking around, I'm supposed to go, this is my time, go to leave class and go to, and they said, oh, I'm sorry, honey. He was driving his snowmobile through the forest, and a tree fell on him and killed him. That's right, he was good. See the lie? So this, can you imagine me in the ministry now? How would I even function? I'd be afraid to do anything good. I wouldn't be standing here today, because it was all wrapped around the fact that you can't be good because bad things happen. In fact, you get attacked more, as a lot of people's belief systems, than somebody who's operating in wickedness, because you're trying to be good. People just get attacked. That's what's real. So here I am married in my 20s, and this thing is like coming up. It's like, it almost feels like it comes up in your throat. You're like, something is coming up I have to deal with. And told my husband to take the kids to church, stayed home, and I just started praying and crying out. It was like it was all built up through different sermons and different things. It was like bringing the queen to the surface. And I didn't know this. I was just thinking, I'm losing it. And I don't know why. So I just hit the floor. I'm in front of the TV. I remember exactly where it was. It wasn't on, but I just remember looking out that way and just being like, God, I am so angry. I am so hurt. And then I addressed the thing with my grandmother. It just came out my mouth, and I was like, what? I literally stopped and was like shocked. Like, I didn't know we were talking about that. But it was my spirit crying out. My subconscious also was saying, we got this out of you. And that was the day it got resolved. And the Lord so clearly told me, honey, bad things happen to everyone. In this world there will be trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world. And it was such, it might sound dumb to you, but it was such an aha moment, because the aha was really not talking to my adult self. It was talking to my 9-year-old self. And my 9-year-old self said, I did not know that. And it was such revelation, like, what? So can it start when you're young? Absolutely. And some of you sitting here have had some pretty mighty clusters that you've been trying to deal with. And you keep killing sentinels. Somehow we got to get at the queen, and we'll be talking about that. You are blessed and highly favored. I'm so glad you came tonight. Have a good evening.